I'm really excited to introduce Katina to this community. Before I do that, I have a couple of quick announcements. I've got one funny story that I just have to share with all of you, and then we'll get going. So the first announcement is that tomorrow's book club begins at 4 p.m. We still have openings. I'm trying to limit it to 20 women just to keep the conversation like easy flowing, but we still have a couple more spaces. So if you're somebody who wants to read this book, Brave Not Perfect, you can get it on audiobook, you can get it on Kindle, and then you can also order it on Amazon if you're someone like me and like needs the physical book. But we start tomorrow at 4 p.m. We're going to be covering the intro, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Very, very excited about that. And of course, we have our coffee chats next Tuesday. We have our happy hour on Thursday, and then we'll be announcing our next Saturday's workshop this upcoming week. So put that in your calendar. We obviously have a lot of opportunities for connection here in this community. And I'm just so grateful for everybody that has been jumping on and making the most of this quarantine with Naked Networking events. The second thing I want to share is that I encourage everybody to share this on your Instagram story. So take a little snapshot that we're all in this Zoom together, and then make sure that when you do share it, you tag networking events, you tag Katina, who is on Adulting, very easy to remember, and then also her business, Daydreamers Space. Katina, can you do me a favor in the chat box, just share your Instagram handles for everybody, that way they all know. That way, we can really expand our community and bring more and more women into this space. What's been really great to see is how from last week's event with Carissa, we had several women join in our Tuesday morning chats and our Thursday afternoon chats that were from different parts of the country because they came across Naked Networking through Carissa. So I'm always looking to find ways to bring this to other women in other states, because one day Naked Networking will not just be in Philadelphia, it'll be in several other states. It'll really be a movement, and it's all going to be because of you guys. So that's something I really wanted to just emphasize here. The third thing I want to share is a funny story. So when I started Naked Networking events, I had a couple of friends, some of my more comical friends, who were like, Shelby, are you sure you want to call it Naked Networking? Like, don't you think that somebody might, think that it could be something that it's not? And I was like, once you explain it, like, no one's going to really think that it's like a nudist colony. And the other day I got a request to join our Facebook group by a guy. And I oftentimes get like really random requests, and I'll look into their profile, and if it looks kind of sketchy, I'll decline it, and then I'll send them a message saying like, hey, I'm sorry I had to decline, like, this is a women's only group. So anyways, I declined this one guy, and then he sends me a message and says, can you please add me into your group? I really would like to join. And I said, I'm really sorry, this is a women's only group. It's a female empowerment group. And he goes, oh, I thought it was like a nudist group. I was really trying to get into that during the quarantine. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry, but that's not here. So thank goodness instead of letting him in, because who knows what we would have gotten, in terms of comments. But that's just my final story to start off the day. But let me go ahead and introduce our guest speaker this morning. I'm so excited to have Katina on with us. So Katina is somebody who I actually don't even know how I got connected to you. Like, I think somebody tagged me in one of your profiles on Instagram, and then I just started following you, and I was like, this girl is amazing. The things you share, the anecdotes that you share, the way that you share, it all really resonated with me. And I actually ended up hiring Katina as my coach last year in June. So Katina's been by my side pretty much throughout the entire growth of Naked Networking, and she's been pivotal in helping me figure out what this would even look like and what this community means to me and where it's going. So I really feel special that I'm able to have her and give her the space to share what she's working on, what she does, and just the magic that she has within her. I'm really grateful that I get to work with you so often, Katina, and I'm really excited just to see what you're going to provide to our community today. So without further ado, Miss Katina Mountanos, take it away.
Hi, everyone. That was so awesome. Thank you so much, Shelby, first for having me. And also, it's so cool to see how many people are here and the community that you've been able to build. So hello to everyone here. I'm really excited for our session today. I think it's going to be such an awesome way to start off our weekend, even though who knows what days are anymore. But today we're going to be talking all about creativity and kind of the neuroscience behind it, why we're all creative human beings, and then working through some brainstorming exercises that Shelby might recognize. We actually do a lot of these in our coaching sessions. But a lot of them are going to be really helpful in setting goals and intentions behind creating a more intentional and creative life. So with that, I am going to share my screen. I'll also say that before we start, I apologize if there's any like background noise. I have a puppy and there's a lot of ambulances sadly going around here in Brooklyn. So if anyone runs into any issues, just feel free to use the chat and let me know. Okay, great. Let's see if this works. I'm kind of like a noob with screen sharing. Can everyone see my redefining free time document on here?
No. And make sure that when you're sharing the screen that you've clicked the PowerPoint, not just the screen, because right now we're just desktop.
Okay, let's see. I'm just gonna reopen it. Can you see it now?
No.
Okay, let's see. Files. Give me 1 second.
So you know when you click screen share and it gives you all the different options where screen and then it should
it's just saying desktop right now, and then like
you have it open on your
whiteboard,
desktop.
Sticky. That's it. Preview maybe.
I can also open it for you, and then you can just tell me when to click if that works best.
Sorry, guys.
It was there for a second, and then it looks like it moves. Do you have two screens? Do you have two monitors?
No, I don't. Okay, so you can see my desktop right now, which is obviously a mess.
Yeah, and I can see your mouse. Can you drag it?
I just opened the PDF, which is odd. Hold on 1 second.
Katina, I can open it up on mine if you want me to, and then you can just tell me when to click.
Perfect. That would be great because it's open on mine and it's not giving me an option to show it.
Can you see it now? Can you see it on my screen?
The screen.
Oh, you can't. You guys can't see it.
I can see it, Shelby. I can see it on yours.
Okay, it seems like everyone can see it on mine, and Katina can.
Well, that's perfect. Oh, okay, I can see it now. Okay, cool. Perfect.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, great. So we could go to slide 1. Perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about a couple of things all about the research behind creativity and kind of brainstorming some ways that we could incorporate creative habits into our life. But before we do that, Shelby gave a wonderful intro of me. I'll just give a little bit more background on what I do, why I'm kind of qualified to talk about these things, and what my journey has been. So again, I'm Katina. I am an entrepreneur, an author, a mindset coach, and I just started experimenting with painting. So that's been a really fun new creative habit for me. And I actually started my career in finance. I started working at Goldman right out of school in data analytics, which is completely different than what I'm doing right now. But I immediately knew that wasn't for me and kind of started experimenting with a lot of different things in my career, ultimately landing on writing and working with other human beings in a kind of strategic and mindset capacity. And right now I run On Adulting, which is my blog I started from my couch as a creative habit about 3 years ago, and also help other millennials kind of navigate adulthood in a mindful and happy way. And most recently, what we're going to talk about today, I just launched a company just a few weeks ago, but we've been working on it for quite a while with my fiance, Dupy, which is called Daydreamers. We could go to the next slide. So just a quick background on what Daydreamers is. Daydreamers essentially is a brand and a movement that we're starting to really help all of us redefine what it means to and how we spend our free time, especially in our modern world. So you can feel free to use your chat function. But before we kind of dive into creativity, let's take a moment just to reflect for a second. How many of you feel like your lives are extremely busy, even during this quarantine? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of me's with exclamation points. The answers are coming in quickly. Okay, perfect. So, me too. And obviously you could see that you're not alone. I just saw a really interesting answer about being busy but not always productive. So productivity is such an interesting word when it comes to creativity, and we're going to get into this, but truly the moments when we're quiet and when we feel bored are actually the times that our brain starts to activate our creative muscles. So when we allow ourselves to simply just be and simply just kind of experience what comes up for us, we start to actually get creative with the solutions of getting out of this bored or frustrated mindset. So we'll get into the why behind that for now. But if you could just flip to the next slide. Obviously, you saw when we all answered, myself included, feeling busy isn't something that is abnormal. Most of us feel that way. But we actually know that research backs this up. And our generation in this moment right now feels more busy, less connected, and less fulfilled than ever in history. And a lot of the reason in our research from Daydreamers proves to be how we're spending our time. And there's actually some really interesting studies that have recently come out that show that we're spending over 11 hours per day scrolling through content. I'll just let that land for a second. 11 hours per day. So that is majority of our day. We're spending on Netflix, we're spending scrolling through our phones, and oftentimes that leaves us feeling drained. There's actually some really interesting research that shows that over 95% of us meaning urban millennials or urban adults truly, wake up and scroll through their phones within 5 minutes of waking up. So what can we do about that? Before we dive into what we could do about that, let's just go to the next slide and kind of see some more information about how this lands. So we kind of just talked through this a little bit, but there's a couple of different categories that we've looked into for Daydreamers. And just to provide some context that if you're feeling burnt out, unfulfilled, isolated, these things are not fully your fault. And also you're not alone in feeling that way. So when we look at the burnt out statistics, Americans are working longer hours and taking less vacations compared to any other developed nation. And also, just to layer on some more information on that, this is kind of the highest statistics in our world in history. So in this moment today, we're working longer and kind of taking less time off of work. At the same time, even though we're working all those hours and really dedicated to our jobs, we're feeling super unfulfilled, right? So over 2/3 of people say that they're not living up to their creative potential, even though almost everyone says that creativity is valuable, right? So we see that there's a problem. And then the second piece, which is a little bit different of a flavor, is that we're feeling really isolated. And I think naked networking is a beautiful example of bringing people together. But on average, over 70% of Americans consider themselves lonely and say that they only have one close friend, which we know that loneliness is a huge epidemic in our world, even though we're constantly connecting, right? We're not having those deep conversations, those deep connections, and even simply just, saying hi to random strangers, which is proven to help us feel better and live longer lives. So all of these statistics aren't just, bad things. They truly have an effect on our immunity, on our longevity, and our overall happiness. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. It's not all bad. It gets so much better. So Jupi and I looked at all these stats, right? And we were like, there has to be something wrong. We totally fit into this bucket where we would come home, scroll through our phones, sit on the couch and be like, why? We work so hard to be happy, to love our jobs, to do all these things that we want to do. And we end up spending our free time when we say we're busy, not filling it with great things. So we knew we had to create a solution for that. And we found that the thing that's really lacking is this idea of joy, which joy is different than happiness in that it's kind of a one-time event that truly makes us feel alive. We're also lacking the ability to be creative, which we saw in those stats, and we're lacking the ability to connect with others. So we're going to focus on creativity today. And one of the really interesting things, we could go to the next slide, is that creativity is something that's super accessible to all of us. So we'll just take a moment to pause. Obviously, all of you who have tapped into this workshop are interested in creativity. Maybe you feel like you are creative, but let's use the chat again and see how many people grew up thinking that they weren't creative. Maybe a teacher told you were a bad painter or you couldn't sing or something of that nature. I'll give everyone to think about it for a second. I still feel like I'm not creative, I'm seeing. Okay, so I feel like this, I couldn't agree more. When we started looking into creativity as a mechanism, just to give you some background on GP, my fiance, he has worked in finance for his entire career, is a very type A, you would never consider him creative on the outside. I, on the other hand, work, I'm a writer, and I access creativity all the time, but there were so many times in my life that I was told, you're not good at art. You don't fit that stereotypical creative bucket. But when Jupi and I peeled back the layer, we talked to a ton of neuroscientists and researchers on this and found that creativity is in our DNA. It's literally what makes us human over animals, over llamas, over fish, whatever it is. The way that our brains are structured as human beings is that there's a huge space, awesome space between the information that we take in and what we put out. And that space gives us the ability to decide what we're going to do. And that is creativity in its basis, right? It's being able to say, do I want to make the same exact wheel as someone else, or do I want to tweak it a little bit? So just thinking about creativity in general, number one, every single person is creative. And there are many different ways that we could be creative. It's not just the typical, like, I'm going to paint this beautiful drawing. And when we access that ability just to think differently, right, there are many benefits. So, of course, let's look at the right side of the screen. When we engage in creativity, it actually activates parts of our brain that have help us feel happier over the long term. So it's not just something that you do and feel good in the moment, but days later, researchers have seen that you have the amazing effects of being in a creative flow state. Secondly, there's really interesting research. It's not just feelings, it's also our bodies. Our physical bodies have an impact of accessing creativity more often than not. So it reduces our cortisol levels, our levels of stress, which are really important in our current state, right? And because of that, it really helps our hearts. So people who access creative thinking more often end up living longer lives. And then looking at the left side of the screen, I think this research here is talking about connection, and we could connect with people, in so many different ways. It doesn't necessarily need to be creative, but we know that strong social connections actually help us live longer, better lives. And when we participate in these high quality leisure, what Jupi and I call high quality leisure, which is connecting with others, doing things with your hands, being creative with other people, it actually helps us create better cognitive skills into later in age. Yes, high quality leisure is, we kind of coined that term at Daydreamers to make up for the low quality leisure that we were reading about. And this is something that we'll get into in a little bit. Okay, next slide. And thank you for managing the slides for me. Okay, so I wanted to keep this slide in here. We use this at Daydreamers when we talk to corporations, but I thought it would be helpful for this audience because I know so many of you maybe are entrepreneurially inclined, or you have your own businesses, or even if you work at a corporation, this is something that you can speak with your managers about or leaders about to help create spaces to be more creative. Because at the end of the day, it's not just an individual thing. It's not just something that makes us happier and healthier. It also helps the bottom line of our businesses too. So when we access creativity and productivity, when we access creativity, it helps us increase our productivity. So going back to one of the statements earlier, when we make space to not do anything and simply just allow ourselves to flow, we end up being more productive in the rest of our lives. And this is really great from a work and business perspective. And then on the flip side, when businesses invest in their employees' creativity, it creates stronger bonds between their employees. So if you do things that allow employees to be creative together and not just always working on work, they end up feeling more engaged, fulfilled, happy, and then obviously working more efficiently. I'm glad. I'm quickly looking at some of the comments. And yeah, there's so much research on this and this idea of incorporating play into work. Okay, we could go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. Perfect. So we're going to start doing some reflection activities together. If you have any type of paper near you, you could even pull up a Word document in your computer. We're going to do a lot of brainstorming today, and I hope that this work together both serves you in terms of reflecting over the long term for yourself, but also we're going to set up a lot of intentions to start creating in our everyday lives. So we're not going to necessarily do any projects today, but I want you all to have the skills and tools to kind of think differently, both about how you spend your time and then also what creativity means and what you can do about it. So the first exercise we're going to do is free writing. This is something that I love doing. It's very hard to get into. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'll time you. Everyone will just be able to go off into their own world. And the purpose of free writing is we really want to allow ourselves not to judge what comes out. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, but a lot of times when we create, whether it's writing, making banana bread, which I've seen a ton on Instagram lately, whatever it is, we want to be perfect, right? And we could also get into a little bit of this research. I think we have some time, but I'm writing a book on adulting, which will be coming out next year. And a lot of what I have provided the research in that book for is why we as millennials and we as women feel like we have to be perfect at all times. And a lot of it relates to this idea of how we were raised. And there were many societal shifts about why, both economic and societal, in the 80s and 90s that forced our generation and mostly everyone on this call to do all the extracurriculars, even if their parents didn't do them, to continue to collect these trophies. So we're going to start to break down some of those layers right now. And we're just going to write without judgment. And there's no purpose behind this writing. You literally are you could write like, I hate writing. This is the worst. I don't even know what I'm writing about for the next 2 minutes. And that's totally okay. We're just going to start to get in the headspace. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes from now to write wherever you can, whatever you're feeling. And then we'll talk about it. Okay, ready? Go. Okay, we have about 30 seconds left. No pressure. Okay, everyone start wrapping up what they're writing. And of course, you could still keep writing and listen to me at the same time. But let's just take a moment, close your eyes, or maybe just simply be for a second and just process how that felt. Like, what emotions in this moment are coming up for you? Did it feel like that was awesome, I haven't wrote in so long, or that was really hard, I don't know what came out, and I haven't accessed this muscle in a really long time, or maybe it was just okay. And just kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so if everyone could just share a little bit, if you feel comfortable in the chat function, or even if anyone here wants to kind of raise their hand and take themselves off mute and share something that came up for them. Sure, Shelby, go ahead. I can't see everyone, so just feel free to go for it after.
Hi, everybody. So one thing that came up for me during this is that I do like to write a lot, and I like to journal where I can, but I always journal to prompts because it gives me a point to get to, which I think just in free writing, like I'm finding so many analogies in life to a lot of things that are happening during this weird time that we're in. And I feel like this idea of free writing, it's almost like meditative in a way where like you hold no judgment to yourself, and you just allow yourself to go wherever you end up going, as opposed to like trying to get to a point or trying to answer a question or like trying to keep a structure. I really enjoy just this idea of like allowing myself to just get things on paper. And like I just wrote about my stream of conscious, like whatever was coming to my mind was just put on paper, which I thought was really cool.
That's exactly right. I love that. I think that's so important. And after maybe one or two more people share, if they feel comfortable, we'll get to why, but you're hitting on the exact right point of what the purpose of this exercise is. Did anyone else want to share? Okay, Jenna, I think.
Sorry, I kept zooming out on my screen. Yeah, I actually, something I challenged myself with, I would say in general in the last year, was kind of journaling and writing. It was something that I don't necessarily do every day, but unlike Shelby, I think I do more of like the free writing. I just kind of open my journal at night when I'm sitting in bed and kind of write thoughts that have come across my mind throughout the day and what's on my mind at the current moment. And it's funny to look back and read because my journal pages are all over the place. Like sometimes it's like, I had a great day at work. Oh, but I'm worried. I have a date tomorrow. Or I went on a date and I was totally terrible. Or I went on a great date, but the guy ghosted me. Like, I mean, every thing, like my journal is so all over the place. but I like the idea of, I've really enjoyed the like quiet time that it's brought to me. Another thing, I am kind of religious, so if you're not, no big deal, but I have learned to kind of write out my prayers, and not just like speak them in my head to God, but write them out too. I don't know that I've necessarily seen anything of that yet, but it's been something that's brought me peace.
I love that. And I think something that you're hitting on, Jenna, is so interesting that like, I, similar to you, often write very random things. Like one day I'm like on the top of the world, the next I'm like, my life is going to shit. I don't know what's going on. And it's really interesting though, because getting into this consistent habit of free writing for every day, you start to see trends. So if you start to go back to some of these free writing exercises, especially if you do them in the morning, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's important in a second, you can pull out some consistent ideas of what you really care about or what is really important to you at that time. So I think it's actually really important to read back, even if it like makes you feel cringy, and start to like process what that is telling you. Anyone else? We'll take one more person to share. I'm really not great at managing the like chat function, so feel free to jump in. Anyone?
I'll go.
Okay.
I got into it after a while. At the beginning, I still, even though I knew it was my own writing and no one was going to see it and it wasn't on a shared screen and I didn't have to share it later, I still had this like mental block where it had to be perfect, which is something I struggle with a lot, is like creative perfectionism. But it was nice because after a moment, I just kind of, like Shelby said, I just kind of like let that go and I was able to just write whatever stream of conscious was coming to me. But in realizing that like that first minute, almost like 50% of the time, I just was sitting there like, it has to be perfect. So yeah.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I am also a recovering perfectionist and super type A person. And I found that this practice literally every day, and I'm not prescribing that everyone needs to do this every day, but this, along with meditation and yoga, has really helped me release that need to be perfect. But I think that this is a wonderful, accessible exercise that everyone can do to kind of remind yourself and release all of those layers that have built up over time, all of those people who have said, like, you're not good at writing, or you need to, like, make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's, right? Like, this is just for you. There's literally no other purpose. So before we move on to the next exercise, I'll just give a little background as to where this exercise came from. I love this book called The Artist's Way. It's very old school. It's like from decades ago. It's by this woman, Julia Cameron. And in the creativity and artist world, it's kind of seen as this like Bible. It's called The Artist's Way. And I can follow up with this information as well. In my blog, if you go to that later, I have a ton of like resources, and there's also a blog post on this entire process called The Early Morning Brain Dump. And it's modified from one of her practices. And essentially what Julia Cameron suggests is, in order to tap into that creativity, to stop having that perfectionist part of you come out, she recommends doing this exercise every morning for 10 minutes. And every morning meaning like the moment that you wake up, before you start to check your phone, check your email, do all this stuff that you have to do, and all those layers start to come onto you again. Allow that creative part of your brain to flourish. And then maybe you do it for 10 days and you start to see the trends, and you go back and you're like, wow, I actually really love writing, even though I've been told that I wasn't that good at it. So it's really interesting as a practice to start. And the reason I wanted to start with this as one of our first exercises is because you could see that it takes a little while to start to undo all those layers. Great. So let's move on to our next exercise, if you don't mind switching the slide. Perfect. So now we're going to do another little writing exercise, and we're going to daydream. And so just a little background as why we chose Daydreamers as the title, and this might be inspiring for this next exercise, is because oftentimes as kids, when we were caught daydreaming, it was considered really bad, right? You were like, you're in trouble. You get detention if you're staring out the window, and you were told not to do it. But based on research, daydreaming, doing nothing, being bored, allowing your mind to wander, all those things allow us to come up with our most creative ideas. So essentially, we right now are going to, again, start to undo all those layers of what maybe we've been told, the rules that have been put on us by parents, teachers, society, whatever, and allow ourselves to just brainstorm some things. So and by the way, we're going to have a topic for this brainstorm, but I encourage all of you to do this with many different parts of your lives. I know Shelby knows we do a lot of no rules brainstorming and coaching, and this is my favorite thing to do, because a lot of times when you start to take a step back and allow yourself to brainstorm without rules, you realize that the rules are not necessary, right? You've kind of just made up these rules that don't exist, and you've kind of just been living them without realizing them. So it's really interesting to apply to many different areas. But today we're going to focus on free time, because our whole concept in this workshop is thinking about where we could slot in more creative habits. So we're going to do kind of an assessment / daydream about what we would do with our free time if there were no rules. Like, let's even go as far to say as no job, no chores, no things that we have to do by society. And I know this isn't realistic, and that's okay. The entire purpose isn't for it to be realistic, but we're just going to allow ourselves to see, if we had the time, if we had the ability, the resources, what would we find ourselves doing? What would we enjoy? What creative projects might we take up? What do you miss in your free time that you aren't doing? So I'll leave it at that. I won't be as prescriptive, but again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to simply brainstorm, and you might continue this later, but just get started. Okay, go. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, start wrapping up whatever you're doing. And of course, this is something that might not be wrapped up at all, but you could come back to it soon. Okay, take a breath. And now I'm going to have you look back at that writing and just read it and see, because sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, but when I write, I like black out, and then I'm like, what did I write here? So take a moment to just assess what you just wrote down during that time and see if some of those things really hold true to you, and some of them you're like, I could do without. So just take a couple of seconds. Okay, so we'll take one or two people if anyone feels compelled to share cool things that came up, bad things that came up, whatever it is. There's no judgment, obviously. But was there anything interesting that you found when you went through this process? And I'll just preface, I can't see everyone's faces, so just feel free to unmute yourself and go for it.
I'll go.
Go for it.
Hi. So what I liked is I can be a very complicated person, but my answer was very simple. So just detox and learn. That's it. Just detox and learn. If I was able to, I would just detox all day. I wouldn't overthink it, so I could actually succeed at it and just learn all the top skills that I want to work on, from having successful campaigns to how to successfully motivate people to, just creating simplified ways to educate. Like, I would just learn from all of the other experts that are just doing the damn thing, succeeding at it, being great. That's it. Just detox and learn all day. I even envisioned like being on a beach while learning and just educating myself, being someplace peaceful. I used to go to Santa Barbara a lot when I was younger, so just being over there. But it was a very simple answer. It wasn't complicated.
That's amazing. I love that what came out for you was really, like, honestly a mantra, right? Something that you remember and kind of turn to in those moments of complication and chaos. So that's amazing. Anyone else feel similar, different?
I don't know if this is going to bounce to me, but I actually did something simple too, because normally I'm a little bit complicated. But hi, Natasha. So I actually used to do yoga all the time, and it used to always put me in a place of peace. So kind of like a similar thing where it's like, it just put me into a reflective area of my life. But I had actually wanted to always like learn it, take it to a different level so that I could teach, because everything that I do, I like to, express and like also help others. Like, so that's kind of like a stepping stone of like, I would like to get back into yoga again, because I was also in touch with my body. I could move better, like had more control, but it was like a peaceful thing. So
yeah, I love that. And I love the feeling that you're describing. A lot of times we forget about kind of what that thing makes us feel. And we just focus on the action. So I love that you led with like, this makes me feel this way, so I want to do it. And that's really the root of intention, right? It comes from like, I want to be this person or feel this way or help people in this way, so I'm going to do this. And a lot of times we lead with like, I'm going to do this so I can do that. So I think that's really awesome.
I saw some of the comments that popped up in relation, and I was just like, maybe we could do like a naked networking like yoga hour.
I am also a certified yoga teacher, so I feel that I think creativity, yoga, mindfulness are all so connected. So I love that. Okay, awesome. We're going to move on to the next thing. We'll have some time to share again in a little bit, but Shelby, if you don't mind clicking to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here and share a little bit more information on how we can think about creative habits, because a lot of times we access creativity once or twice, and then we're like too busy, not doing it again, right? Or we're like, this doesn't fit into my schedule or my life or whatever it is. So our purpose at Daydreamers, and what I really want you all to walk away from this with, is this idea that you can really create a habit over time. And this is kind of like a muscle that you just need to continue to use in different ways. So what we're going to do today, and how you could start to build these habits, is first create an intention of what you want to do to redefine your free time. And maybe that starts with a feeling you want to have, or something you want to get rid of in your life, whatever it is. Just starting with that root of intention, so you approach this in a conscious, mindful way. And then over time, there are a couple of things to keep in mind that we've talked about today quite a bit. First, there's this idea that we choose one hobby or one creative habit and we stick with it forever. And we've, in our society today, forgotten the importance of leisure and the importance of like not being so great at everything and just experimenting. And we know from research that experimenting with a lot of different creative mediums and constantly learning, which I've heard from you all quite a bit, is really great for our brain health. So keeping in mind this idea of being able to experiment. The second is kind of backing off of that, and we've talked about a lot, is this idea of redefining perfect. So we don't need to be the best. We don't need to turn our hobbies into side hustles at all. Like the purpose here is just to be, just to enjoy. So we can just experience without an end goal. And I think that's a really important reframing when we think about hobbies. The second is showing up consistently. This is the hard part. So we need to kind of think about how we can fit these habits into our lives and not show up every day, not be the best again, but make it a consistent habit, an achievable habit, something that we could truly fit into our lives, no matter what the result is. Like maybe you want to start creating sourdough or sourdough bread. I know that's a high achievement bar. Doopy, my fiance, does that on his own. I don't. But every day he shows up and just feeds his starter. And that's a really small thing, right? He's not making bread every day, but he's showing up in his mind to this thing. But I think that we don't necessarily apply that to many things in our lives. So it's a really important mindset shift again. And then lastly, I think you all are really great at this because you've shown up here today, but share it with friends, encourage others. We know how important connectivity is, whether we're connecting via a screen or with a stranger at a coffee shop or whatever it is. But I think that this is really important to get other people that you care about involved and kind of create with them. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so before we wrap up today, we are all going to set an intention about building creative habits. It doesn't need to be like by May, I want to be the best painter ever, right? It could be, I right now, starting in this moment, want to just think differently about how I spend my time after dinner. Maybe instead of turning on Netflix, I break out watercolors and do that while I'm talking with my roommate or something. So let's just set a realistic intention that feels good to us in this moment right now about building habits. And everyone will just take a couple of seconds or a minute or so to write that down. And then if you feel comfortable, we could all share it in the chat so we hold each other accountable. And I'll read a few. If anyone wants to share, you can feel free. Ooh, okay, cool. I'm seeing some come in. So 1 hour of creativity each day, setting aside designated time to be creative, explore without judgment. I love all of these. So important. Amazing. And I think you guys can continue sharing this and honestly use Make a Networking Community as a place to hold each other accountable and really share and continue this conversation after this workshop to hopefully inspire others in the community to start using their time a little bit differently. Ooh, journaling. Yes, that is a great intention. Okay, I think we could jump to the next slide. I think we're just about done. Yes, so it's really important to me. It's really truly my life's mission to help everyone be as creative, resilient, connected, conscious as possible. So I hope that you all could use this workshop as something that you start to share with your communities, your families, your friends, and truly use it as a launching point for yourself, not to be perfect, not to be creating stuff for others, but truly be creating stuff to help you live a happier, healthier life. So I hope this was helpful. I know we're wrapping up a little bit early, but just so you could find me, I would love to see your creations. You could tag me at On Adulting and at Daydreamers. We obviously just launched a few weeks ago, but we are launching, or just recently launched, a new campaign called Create Not Curate. And we're using that hashtag Create Not Curate so that literally every human being who has time on their hands, which I know we all do, can use this time again to inspire others to think a little bit differently about how we spend our time and feel more alive in our everyday lives. So if you create anything, whether it's your morning pages, a thread, whatever it is, tag us, share it, and we'll continue sharing it with others. So thank you so much for having me today. I hope this was helpful, and definitely stay connected with me as much as you can. I would love to see you.
Katina, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. And what's so great is that you bring such a calming nature, and it's in a way where it's inspiring, and like there's like an inner fire that's like glowing within me.
Yay.
Calming way, which is really, really cool.
I've heard my voice.
Our last workshop was like, it's such a cool change of pace, but also like still giving a really, really, really deep desire to get into action after this, in terms of getting into creative action. Like, I know I'm going to go to Target after this because Target's not closed, and I can go buy some markers or something. I do want to give the opportunity for people to ask any questions. I know we have 5 minutes here. So if anybody has questions, please.
Can you take the screen? That way we can see everybody.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, hi. So if anyone has any questions, just do some jazz hands and I'll unmute you. Liz, all right. Hey, girlfriend. Oh, I'm trying to unmute you, but I can't. Are you unmuting yourself? Unmute. I don't know why I can't unmute you. Maybe if I just unmute everybody. Unmute all. All participants are unmuted, but it says you're all still muted.
Oh, I figured it out.
There we go. Okay,
that was my bad.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to ask, how did you kind of start I know you said that you're a certified yoga instructor, but what are some creative things that are kind of out of the box? Because a lot of people, when they think of like, oh, are you a creative person, they think, oh, no, I don't really paint, I don't knit, I don't do this or that. But just since you're kind of really dug into this, I was wondering if you know of any kind of like out of the box ways of being really creative and getting in tuned to your more creative side.
That's such a great question. So I always love to think of the most accessible ways to be creative. I think like you don't need a lot of stuff to be creative. And I think that it's really just a mindset. So when I was working in finance, I would say I wasn't accessing a creative mindset, right? I was very much like living in this black and white world where I would wake up, go to the gym, grab my coffee, chug it, go to work, like go to a happy hour, go home, and wasn't thinking differently at all. But when I started kind of leaning into more of a flow, right? So I found yoga similarly at the same time that I started loosening the grips on a lot of this stuff. I would say I really just started allowing myself to like ask if I wanted to do something. And I think that to me in itself is creative, right? Because we're not just following these set rules of what other people are telling us we're supposed to do. More specifically, I think that for me, actually, I access creativity every day because writing is truly my way of processing the world. And I recently heard this amazing sculptor, Daniel Arsham. You guys should look him up. He is so cool. He's based in New York and does some really amazing work. And I went to a talk he was giving, and he used the quote that whatever artists create is their way of processing what is going on in the world. And hopefully others will understand that and relate to it in some way. And I think using that basis of creativity of like, what are you processing and how are you letting it out is really helpful in terms of accessibility. So I first started with writing, and I actually have tapped into painting a lot, as I said earlier. And it's not in a like, I need to do all this stuff way. I literally got like a tiny thing of watercolors, and you might see on my Instagram, I use it to like paint behind words that I write. And that's been really fun for me. But in our community, in the Daydreamers community, we've seen so many different things: acting, photography, podcasting, talking to others, calligraphy. Like there's so many cool things that people could do, and you don't need to be good at it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, there's some of those things that I never thought about before. Thank you.
Liz, something that I do too, just to bounce off of what Katina just said, is I think about ways to keep my hands busy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because what zaps my creativity is when I go to this. Unless I'm making a TikTok, then I'm really creative. But usually I just end up scrolling, and then I'm like, I'm drained afterwards. So even doing a puzzle to me is like activating my creative brain because it's keeping my hands busy and away from the like temptation of this black hole.
I think it's such a great definition, Shelby, because at Daydreamers we say, like, there are a lot of different definitions of creativity, but we say anything you can do with your hands is what we consider, you know, like what we want to help people with more. But
yeah. Well, Katina, I know that you're in our Facebook community. So if anybody has any additional questions, they can find Katina in there. And just, I would encourage you, just so that the rest of our community who couldn't be on today's call can see what we're talking about. If you have additional questions, like write it in the Facebook group and tag Katina in it. That way everybody else can see the answers and the questions. But I really encourage everybody to plug into the Daydreamer space, get to know Katina on Adulting as well. And I mean, I think it could be really fun if we all as a community start using that hashtag create, not curate, and see what comes from it. I would ask that when you do it, if you're coming from the Naked Networking community, please also like somehow tag Naked Networking so I can reshare it on our page too. Yeah. More people can see Daydreamers and see what's going on here. But I really appreciate you, Katina. Again, I know I've said it like so many times, but seriously, like it's been amazing to work with you one-on-one and have you give me guided journal prompts, because that's kind of where I creative writing stuff. But truly, it's helped me dream bigger about this community. And I really believe that because of accessing my individual creativity, it's allowed me to build this community to the point where we're at now. And so you on this call, like, know that what she's talking about, like, it really, really works. I'm sure you all know that already, but I really am just grateful for you in my life and for you coming into this community and being able to touch everybody else's life in a cool way. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone that's on today's call, and we'll see you all on the internet and on video chat and all that good stuff until we can have our first live event back from this crazy time. So
thank you all so much. This is awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.